Please take a deep breath and close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the scent of fresh tatami mats baking in the afternoon sun, or the distant, melancholy melody of a kerosene truck slowly making its way down your childhood street. Do you feel that sudden, warm ache in your chest? That is the magic of the 1960s and 70s calling you back home. Today, I want to invite you on a gentle journey through time, returning to an era in Japan that felt incredibly vibrant, yet wonderfully unhurried. We are going to rediscover 20 everyday items and lost rituals from our past that vanished so quietly we hardly noticed they were gone. These were the simple, beautiful things that filled our days with meaning and connected us to our families and neighbors. And I promise you, when we reach the very last item on our list, you will be transported right back to your very first day of elementary school, feeling the weight of a brand new world on your shoulders. Life during the Showa era moved at a completely different rhythm than it does today. Time seemed to stretch out like a long, lazy shadow on a summer afternoon. Without the constant interruption of modern screens and instant messages, waiting was simply a natural, expected part of our daily existence. We waited for the postman, we waited for our favorite television show to air, and we waited for the kettle to boil on the stove. And within that beautiful waiting, we found true human connection. We spoke to our neighbors over low wooden fences. We shared meals without distractions, and we learned to appreciate the tactile, physical world around us. There is a common myth today that living without advanced technology meant our lives were somehow poorer or less fulfilling. But you and I know the absolute truth. Life back then was infinitely richer in sincerity, emotion, and community. We did not need endless digital feeds to feel alive, because the physical objects we interacted with every single day were crafted with care and handled with love. They were the silent witnesses to our youth and the quiet anchors of our family homes. Let us begin our journey by stepping out into the unpaved streets of your childhood neighborhood, just as the sun begins its descent. Do you remember the sharp, echoing clack of wooden blocks piercing the afternoon air? It was the Kamishibai man arriving on his heavy bicycle. The moment those two wooden clappers struck together, children would come running from every direction, clutching their precious coins. For just a few yen, you could buy a sticky, sweet piece of candy, which earned you a spot right in the front row. The man would slide beautifully painted cardboard pictures out of a wooden frame mounted on his bicycle rack, using different voices to tell thrilling stories of heroes, ghosts, and adventures. We would all sit there, completely captivated by his theatrical voice and the vivid colors of the illustrations. It was our very own street corner cinema, a shared experience where the entire neighborhood of children became one captivated audience. When television sets eventually entered our living rooms, the Kamishibai man slowly rode away into history, taking a piece of our communal childhood magic with him. Now, let us step back inside the house and look over at the hallway table. Sitting there, heavy and imposing, was the kurodenwa, the black rotary dial telephone. This was not something you carried in your pocket. It was an anchor in the home. Do you remember the sheer physical weight of the receiver when you picked it up? You had to place your finger in the little plastic hole, pull the heavy dial all the way around, and listen to that satisfying, mechanical whirring sound as it spun back into place. Calling someone was an intentional, deliberate act. You had to memorize the phone numbers of your closest friends and family members, keeping them safely stored in your mind. Often, the phone was dressed up with a delicate white lace cover knitted by a mother or grandmother, turning this piece of machinery into a respected piece of furniture. Because there was only one line for the entire family, conversations were public, and answering the phone was a polite ritual. We lost that beautiful tactile anticipation of turning the dial when push buttons and touch screens took over our lives. As the humid summer months rolled in, bringing the deafening song of cicadas, another distinct sensory memory filled our homes. It was the Katori Senko, the deep green, spiral mosquito repellent coil. But it was not just the coil itself that brings back memories. It was the charming ceramic pig, the Kayari Buta, that held it. You would carefully light the tip of the brittle green spiral with a match, watching the tiny red ember catch hold, and then slide it into the belly of the ceramic pig. Soon, a thin, mesmerizing ribbon of white smoke would drift out of the pig's snout. That earthy, slightly sharp scent of pyrethrum would settle over the tatami room, mixing with the damp smell of the evening breeze blowing through the screen doors. Families would sit around the glowing coil, eating sliced watermelon and waving paper fans. The smell of the Katori Senko meant summer had officially arrived. Today, with silent, odorless electric plugins, we no longer have that visible, fragrant guardian watching over our peaceful summer nights. Let us talk about a ritual that cleansed both the body and the soul. The neighborhood sento, or public bathhouse. Before every home had its own modern bathroom, the sento was the beating heart of the community. Do you recall the smooth, polished feeling of the tall wooden tags used as locker keys? You would slide the wooden piece out of the slot, securing your belongings before stepping into the echoing, steam-filled room. The sound of water splashing against tile and the hum of neighborhood gossip created a comforting symphony. But the absolute best part of this ritual came right after the bath. You would step back into the dressing room, your skin glowing and warm, and purchase a small, heavy glass bottle of cold milk. The unspoken rule was that you had to stand with one hand placed firmly on your hip, tipping your head back to drink the icy milk in one glorious, continuous gulp. The contrast of the freezing sweet milk against your overheated body was pure heaven. It was a communal joy that private, modern bathrooms can never quite replicate. At the center of family life was the chabudai, the low, round wooden table with foldable legs. This unassuming piece of furniture was the stage for almost everything that happened in the home. Unlike heavy, stationary dining tables of today, the chabudai required us to sit down on the tatami floor, cross-legged or on our knees, bringing everyone physically closer together. There was no escaping the intimacy of the chabudai. It was where the mother prepared vegetables, where the children hunched over to do their schoolwork, and where the entire family gathered shoulder to shoulder to eat dinner while watching a single television set. When the meal was over, the table was simply wiped clean, its legs were folded with a sharp snapping sound, and it was slid into a closet or leaned against a wall to make room for the futons. It represented a beautiful flexibility of space. The chabudai taught us that a room could be anything we needed it to be, and that being close to our loved ones was simply the natural way to live. Think back to your daily commute or a special trip on the train. Long before the silent, electronic beep of modern smart cards, train stations were filled with a frantic, incredible music. It was the sound of the station attendants, the ticket punchers, standing in their booths during rush hour. Armed with a heavy metal hole puncher, their hands moved with lightning speed, creating a rhythmic, metallic clicking that echoed across the station. Clack, 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 clack. It was an absolute performance of skill and dexterity. You would hand them your tiny, stiff cardboard ticket, and in a fraction of a second, they would punch a small hole in it and hand it back, never breaking their rhythm and rarely even looking at their hands. Each station had a slightly different shaped punch hole, which felt like a secret code. Holding that tiny, punched piece of cardboard in your pocket made you feel like you were truly going somewhere. The silence of today's automated gates feels incredibly dull compared to the lively, percussive greeting of those station masters. Now, let us wander into a classic Showa-era kitchen. If there is one visual that instantly transports us back to the 1970s, it is the explosion of bright, cheerful floral patterns on our home appliances. Specifically, the electric rice cookers and thermos pots. Do you remember those brilliant orange, vibrant green, and sunny yellow flowers blooming across the shiny metal exterior of the rice cooker? Before appliances became sleek, minimalist, and uniformly silver or black, they were designed to bring a bold sense of joy and warmth into the kitchen. The mother of the house would measure out the rice, and later, the loud, satisfying click of the heavy button popping up signaled that dinner was finally ready. The whole kitchen would fill with the sweet, starchy scent of freshly steamed rice. Those floral patterned pots sat proudly on the counter, serving as a bright, optimistic symbol of a rapidly modernizing Japan, while still keeping the deeply traditional heart of the home completely intact. Early in the morning, long before the sun had fully risen, another quiet ritual took place at the front door of almost every home. It was the arrival of the milk delivery. Screwed to the wall or placed gently on the porch was a small, insulated box, sometimes made of wood, painted with the logo of the local dairy. While we slept, the milkman would arrive, and if you were awake, you could hear the gentle clinking of glass bottles being swapped out. Opening that box in the crisp morning air revealed bottles of fresh milk, often sealed with a thick paper cap. We would carefully peel back the paper lid, trying not to spill the thick, rich cream that had gathered at the very top. Returning the empty, rinsed glass bottles to the box the next evening was a small responsibility we all shared. There was something profoundly comforting about knowing that someone had quietly visited in the dark to ensure the family had fresh milk for breakfast, creating an invisible bond of trust between the community and the delivery man. If you step outside on a bright, sunny weekend morning in the 1970s, you would be greeted by a very specific, echoing sound. Whack, whack, whack. It was the sound of the futon tataki, the woven bamboo or plastic futon beater. After a week of sleeping on the floor, families would drape their heavy cotton futons over the balcony railing to bake in the direct sunlight. The mother of the house would take the paddle-shaped beater and strike the futons with vigorous, rhythmic swings to knock out the dust. The sound would echo down the street, answering the strikes of other neighbors doing the exact same chore. It was the percussive soundtrack of a sunny day, and the reward for this hard work was simply glorious. When night fell and the futons were brought back inside and laid out on the tatami, they carried a distinct, incredibly comforting scent. It was the smell of sunshine baked deep into the warm cotton. Sleeping in a sun-dried futon was a simple luxury that wrapped around you like a warm embrace. Sometimes, the quiet peace of the neighborhood would be shattered by a sudden, joyful explosion of sound. You would hear the crashing of cymbals, the beating of a drum, and the sharp twang of a shamisen. It was the chindonya, the traditional street musicians and advertisers. Dressed in incredibly vibrant, elaborate, and sometimes slightly comical period costumes, with their faces painted in stark white makeup, they would march down the street to announce the grand opening of a new pachinko parlor or a local grocery store. Children would drop whatever they were doing and run to the edge of the road to watch the parade go by. The musicians would hand out flyers while playing their wildly infectious, upbeat tunes. They brought a sense of spontaneous festival magic right to our front doors. In a world before internet ads and giant digital billboards, the chindonya relied on pure human energy, color, and noise to capture our attention, leaving a trail of excitement and smiles in their wake. Do you remember the thrill of the local shopping street, the shotengai, during a special promotion? If your mother bought enough groceries, she would receive a handful of paper tickets, which meant you got to spin the gara-gara, the lottery machine. Sitting on a table in front of a shop was a large, heavy, hexagonal drum made of polished wood, attached to a metal crank. You would hand over your tickets, grasp the wooden handle, and give it a firm spin. The sound it made was unmistakable, a loud, rattling rumble as hundreds of tiny colored marbles tumbled inside the wooden chamber. Then, a single little ball would drop out of a hole into a tiny tray. If it was a white ball, you usually received a small piece of tissue paper or a piece of cheap candy. But if a red or gold ball tumbled out, the shopkeeper would vigorously ring a handheld brass bell, shouting congratulations for all the street to hear. The tactile joy of turning that heavy wooden wheel is something a digital tap on a screen can never replicate. When the brutal heats of August became absolutely unbearable, salvation came in the form of a heavy cast iron machine. The manual kakigori, or shaved ice maker, was a fixture at summer festivals and small neighborhood sweet shops. It looked like a beautiful mechanical beast, often painted in a deep, glossy blue or green, featuring a large, heavy-spoked wheel on the side. The shop owner would place a massive, perfectly clear block of solid ice beneath the sharp metal blade. Then, they would turn the heavy wheel with a smooth, continuous motion. The sound was magical, a loud, scraping, crunching noise as the blade shaved the ice block into delicate, snowy mounds. We would watch in awe as the fluffy ice piled up in a glass bowl. Finally, they would pour bright, impossibly vibrant red strawberry or green melon syrup over the top, the sweet liquid instantly melting into the snow. Eating that freezing, sugary ice while standing in the sticky summer heat is a sensory memory that defines childhood for an entire generation. As the seasons turned and the bitter cold of winter seeped through the thin wooden walls of our homes, a different kind of vehicle would slowly roll through the neighborhood. It was the small, open-back truck delivering to you, or kerosene, for our space heaters. You always knew it was coming before you saw it, because the truck played a slow, slightly melancholic electronic melody through a loudspeaker, often the tune of Amaryllis, or a simple folk song. Hearing that music meant warmth was on the way. You or your parents would rush out with empty, bright red or blue plastic jerry cans, waiting by the side of the road. The attendant would pump the clear liquid into the cans, and the sharp, distinctive smell of kerosene would fill the freezing winter air. Back inside, filling the heavy metal heater and pressing the ignition switch brought a glowing, orange warmth to the room. The smell of burning kerosene and the glow of the heater became synonymous with cozy winter evenings spent peeling mandarin oranges with the family. Long before anyone spoke about being environmentally friendly, we had a profoundly beautiful and sustainable way of carrying our belongings. The furoshiki, a simple, square piece of traditional wrapping cloth. It was truly a magic trick of daily life. A mother could take a flat piece of fabric adorned with elegant geometric patterns, flying cranes, or seasonal flowers, and with a few deft, practiced folds and knots, transform it into a perfectly balanced carrying bag. We used furoshiki to wrap our small bento boxes for school, tying the knot securely at the top. Adults used larger ones to carry groceries, gifts, or clothes to the public bathhouse. There was a quiet elegance in the way the fabric draped, and the cleverness of the knots that held everything safely inside. It taught us to respect our belongings and to find beauty in utility. The feeling of untying a carefully knotted furoshiki to reveal a handmade lunch was a tactile pleasure that disposable plastic bags entirely erased from our daily routines. Let us revisit a joyful summer ritual that required almost nothing but a piece of fruit, a wooden stick, and a lot of laughter. Suikawari, or watermelon splitting. In the height of summer, a massive dark green watermelon would be purchased and placed into a deep metal bucket filled with freezing cold well water, or left to cool in a nearby flowing river. Once it was perfectly chilled, the games began. A child would be blindfolded with a cloth towel, handed a smooth wooden stick, and spun around until dizzy. The rest of the family and friends would shout frantic directions. Go left, go right, a little more forward. The anticipation built until the stick was finally brought down with a tremendous thud. When the melon finally cracked open, revealing the brilliant, glittering red fruit inside, a cheer went up. Sitting on the wooden veranda, the engawa, spitting shiny black watermelon seeds into the garden while the sweet juice ran down our chins, was the absolute peak of summer happiness. Speaking of summer on the veranda, there was one item that was perpetually in our hands during those sticky, windless afternoons. The uchiwa, the traditional flat paper fan. But I am not just talking about the expensive, artisan-crafted fans. I am talking about the everyday uchiwa given away for free by local banks, pharmacies, and hardware stores. They had sturdy bamboo frames and were covered with paper displaying local advertisements, bold calligraphy, or pictures of popular summer flowers. When the air grew heavy and completely still, the rhythmic flapping of the uchiwa provided our only relief. Older people would sit in the shade, slowly fanning themselves, the gentle rustle of the paper blending with the delicate chiming of a glass wind chime hanging from the eaves. Fanning someone else, a sleeping child or an elderly parent, was an unspoken gesture of deep affection. Those simple bamboo frames held the very breath of summer, providing a gentle breeze that electric fans and air conditioners have since mechanized. For those of us who loved to read, a trip to the local bookstore involved a beautiful, meticulous ritual that has almost completely vanished. Whenever you purchased a bunkubon, a small, pocket-sized paperback book, the clerk at the counter would offer to wrap it for you. With incredible speed and precision, they would take a piece of custom paper featuring the bookstore's unique logo or design, fold it neatly over the covers, and tuck the edges inside perfectly. It was a completely complimentary service, but it felt like receiving a carefully wrapped gift. When you took the book home, it smelled like fresh ink, glue, and that crisp wrapping paper. Reading the book on the train or in a cafe felt private because the cover was hidden from the world by the bookstore's beautiful paper. We would collect these wrapped books on our shelves, a visual diary of the local shops we had visited over the years. The simple grace of the clerk folding that paper is a lost art of everyday customer care. If we listen closely to the memories of the unpaved or newly paved streets of the 60s, we can hear the distinct wooden music of footsteps, clop, clop, clop. It was the sound of geta, the traditional wooden clogs. While Western shoes were becoming the norm for school and work, slipping into a pair of geta was still deeply woven into everyday life, especially during summer festivals or a quick walk to the neighborhood store. Do you remember the feeling of the soft, fabric thong, the hanao, pressed between your toes? The heavy wooden base forced you to walk with a slightly different, more deliberate posture. Running in geta was an art form in itself, requiring a strange, shuffling sprint to keep them from flying off. Over time, the wooden teeth on the bottom would slowly wear down, perfectly matching the unique strike of your foot. They were loud. They were unapologetic, and they connected you directly to the earth with every single step you took. Inside the traditional Japanese home, the changing of the seasons brought a very specific household chore that required immense patience and delicate fingers. It was the patching and replacing of the shoji, the translucent paper sliding doors. Throughout the year, children would inevitably poke tiny holes through the fragile white paper with their fingers, leaving little tears in the perfect grid. Instead of replacing the whole sheet immediately, a mother or grandmother would carefully cut a small, beautiful shape out of fresh paper, perhaps a cherry blossom or a simple circle, and paste it delicately over the hole. It was a beautiful way to mend things, turning an accident into a tiny piece of art. When the new year approached, the ritual of replacing the entire paper took place. We would wet the old paper to dissolve the glue, wash the wooden frames, and gently roll out the new, crisp white paper, pulling it taut. The way the morning light filtered through fresh, pristine shoji paper made the entire room feel wonderfully pure and reborn. And finally, we arrive at an item that carries the absolute weight of our earliest milestones. Think back to your very first day of elementary school. Do you remember the overwhelming smell of stiff, new leather? It was your randoseru, the iconic, structured school bag. In those days, the choices were strictly limited. Boys wore black, and girls wore bright red, nothing else. When you first put it on, the thick leather straps felt terribly stiff against your shoulders, and the bag felt enormous, almost swallowing your small frame. But over the next 6 years, an incredible transformation occurred. The leather softened, molding perfectly to the shape of your back. It accumulated scratches, scuffs, and faded spots, bearing the silent scars of dropped bags in the dirt, running in the rain, and leaning against brick walls. By the time you graduated, that heavy leather bag was no longer just a backpack. It was a loyal, weathered companion that had carried you through the entirety of your childhood. Letting it go meant finally saying goodbye to the little boy or girl you once were. When we look back at all of these beautifully crafted objects, from the heavy black rotary phone to the bright floral rice cooker, we realize something incredibly important. We are not just missing the physical things themselves. We are missing our youth, our unhurried sense of time, and the deep, everyday connections we shared with our families and our neighbors. These forgotten items were the silent, beautiful architecture of our memories. They demanded our patience, our touch, and our presence. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face, or perhaps a gentle tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so we can continue to preserve these precious memories together. Now, I want to ask you a question. Out of all the things we talked about today, which one do you miss the absolute most? Or is there another cherished item from your childhood that I missed? Please, write your story in the comments below. Let us keep the beautiful spirit of the Showa era alive, one memory at a time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.